Okay, well, welcome everyone. Excellent to see such a great turnout for Mines and Money 5 at 5, the week of IMARC. I'm Mike Kill, Head of Mining for Mines and Money in IMARC. We've got a special edition this week, which is sponsored by the New South Wales Government. Excited, we've got some exciting companies and an excellent host of the event. I'll just run for a quick bit of housekeeping in respect of how, if you want to ask some questions, how you get your point across. There's a couple of means to use it. So there's a Zoom setup. So if you want to raise your hand, just go down to the bottom section and just click into raise your hand. It will pop up, and then Nick and myself will notify Hedley if there's any questions. The other way, we'll either use that as a system to actually ask people verbally, or you can actually just send a note as well. So I think without further ado, I'll hand you over to our host, a colourful character, well-known in the industry, Hedley Widdup, Executive Director of Lions Selection Group. Hedley, over to you.
Thanks very much, Mike, and thanks very much to IMARC for asking me to be involved in this panel. Thanks very much for IMARC for combining it with their event, but also to New South Wales for sponsoring this event. And I believe they're a sponsor of IMARC. So it all ties together quite nicely, I think, for the discussion that we're going to have tonight. We're going to hear from 4 companies which are really on the cutting edge of the exciting developments of exploration in New South Wales, all very active. And up front, we're going to hear from Trisha Moriarty from the department, the Geo Survey in New South Wales, to tell us a little bit about the framework that those companies work within and why. But look, I think this is a really interesting focus to have, because we're sitting here in a mining boom which is taking off. We've seen about 18 months of great activity in gold, but not in too many other commodities yet in terms of getting a leg on. So it's a terrific time to be exploring. And some of the more the super popular jurisdictions, the Nevadas of this world, the Western Australias of this world, get really crowded really quickly, and things get expensive quite quickly. New South Wales is extremely prospective. If you look through the history, New South Wales, as far as the officially documented history, first place in Australia that gold was documented to have been found. And I think even if you go through the unofficial history, it's very likely that gold was first discovered in New South Wales rather than anywhere else. Wasn't the first metalliferous mining jurisdiction, South Australia was, but very, very close on the firsts of just about everything else. It's got a large industry as far as gold goes, second only to Western Australia in terms of gold production. And of course, a very vibrant and large coal and energy mining sector, as well as a number of other things. Interestingly, though, it captures at the moment about 12% of the total Australian exploration spend, and in gold, it captures about 1/10 of the exploration spend that Western Australia does. So despite having some really large mines, and I'm thinking Cadia, I'm thinking where Evolution is at Cal, and I'm thinking about Broken Hill. It sees a fraction of the spend that it does in Western Australia. I don't think prospectivity is too different when you're comparing area. They're both very large places. So here's New South Wales sitting there with opportunities which are probably ripe for investors, I would say, in that case. I'll finish off with one amusing story, which is that I had someone come and see me about 2 or 3 years ago trying to sell a gold story, and he was talking about outcropping alluvial gold at the surface. And the way he premised it was that Lassiter, who of course gave the name to the Lassiter's Reef, which has never ever been located, went out of Alice Springs, found this amazing gold reef, and then returned to Alice Springs to tell everyone about it, and couldn't lead them back there. Everyone thinks that he was full of crap as a result. So the theory that this fellow had was that Lassiter actually lied about the direction that he went. Instead of walking into the middle of the Northern Territory, he actually walked into northern New South Wales, and that Lassiter's Reef sits there to be found. And when you compare the two geological settings, I actually think that's almost believable, even if it is just a really nice story. So without further ado, there's plenty to talk about tonight. Can I pass over to Trisha Moriarty from the New South Wales Geological Survey, who's going to give us a little bit of an overview of New South Wales before we get into the investment opportunities that sit there. Thanks, Trisha.
Thank you, Hedley. So I might just ask if my slides can be brought up, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. So to start the session, I would just like to provide a very short introduction to the key reasons of why we see New South Wales is becoming a world-class destination for mineral investment. So first slide, please. So a major strength of New South Wales is a number of prospect regions we have for copper and gold potential in a range of deposit styles. So the Geological Survey has recently released a number of mineral potential maps for the newly recognised iron oxide copper gold deposits in the Broken Hill block, The prospective Cooneree Belt to the north is underexplored and has mineral potential mapping available for orogenic gold and copper-rich VMS. In the New England origin to the east, mineral potential mapping of intrusion-related gold has highlighted unpegged areas with high potential, and the largest region is the mineral-rich Lachlan origin region, and it's prospected for orogenic gold, VMS, as well as porphyry copper gold and the Cobalt Basin style deposits. But the jewel in the crown for New South Wales, as already mentioned, is Australia's largest gold mine, Newcrest Cadia Valley. It sits right in the middle of the Lachlan origin and is currently the world's 6th largest gold operation according to tonnes produced. And this operation is a beacon for exploration effort in the copper gold porphyry deposits. And Alkane's Resources' recent Boda discovery last year to the north of Cadia has sparked a rush into the province. And in the gold base metal rich Cobalt Basin to the west, new resources discoveries in the southern part of that basin by Peel Mining and Aurelia have also sparked new interest in this area. And the Cobalt Basin is actually a focus area for our pre-competitive data acquisition program. Next slide, please. So New South Government is always also keen to highlight our critical mineral opportunities. So in New South Wales, we have 45 projects that cover 17 of the 24 identified critical minerals. These include the titanium zirconium produced by the world-class Ginkgo Snapper heavy mineral sands mines in the Murray Basin, and the Australian Strategic Metals Dubbo project is one of the world's largest in-ground resources for zirconium, hafnium, yttrium and rare earth oxides. But there are a number of other advanced and also greenfield projects across New South Wales seeking investment. Next slide, please. And just to finish off, in support of exploration, New South Government is making significant investment in research and pre-competitive data initiatives. And these include our New Frontiers drilling program, which provide grants to support companies in their drilling programs. And we've been running this for the last 3 years. Our involvement in MENEX CSC, which includes the National Drilling Initiative, which is for exploring in under-resourced, underexplored areas, rather. And also our New Frontiers pre-competitive data acquisition program. So, which for this year includes, but is not limited to, the AEM survey and hydrogeochemical sampling analysis carried out in the Greater Cobar Basin, hyperspectral scanning of thousands of metres of core using our HiLogger, and the mineral potential mapping that I've mentioned previously we've completed as well. So, and all of this data is easily accessible from one portal, our MinView portal. It's been designed to be fast and easy, and it really provides quick and easy access so you can see all the data that we have available and for you to download it and use it to assist companies in all their exploration endeavours. So, thank you. That concludes the presentation.
Thanks very much, Trisha. Look, I think we'll move on quickly because there probably won't be any questions just at this stage from the audience in particular, and we might get through a few of the companies before we round back. But there will be some questions there, I'm sure, about prospectivity and all the rest of it. So stay on the line for that. And congratulations for coming in bang on 3 minutes. You go to conferences all the time and you get people crapping on about budgets and timelines. And the people that blow out time, the worst of all is the major miners. You know, the people who represent government, the people from the juniors, always finish bang on time. That was really pleasing. So let's move right along. We've got 4 very exciting exploration companies here to talk to us, and the first of those is represented by Mike Jones from Impact Minerals. Mike, I think you might get the impression as soon as he starts talking, and perhaps if we start cueing Mike's slides whilst I'm introducing him. Mike is a genuine geologist. You can tell that from his facial hair. It's hard to trust a geologist sometimes if they don't have enough facial hair, some of the old time blokes would say. Trisha, of course, I hope that doesn't come across as in the wrong context, but Mike, very well credentialed, he's been all over the world and is very well qualified as a geologist. So I think we're going to get a geological treat to start us off there. Over to you, Mike.
My 3 minutes starts now. Yeah, thanks, Hedley. We've got the first screen up there. Look, Impact, we've got 3 major projects, one in WA, but the 2 key ones we're talking about today are Broken Hill and Commonwealth, both in New South Wales. And maybe Hedley will give me an extra 20 seconds because I would like to say that New South Wales Government has been very supportive over the years to our work and also the industry in general. Currently, we're the recipient of a $75,000 grant, co-funding grants that are commonly given out nowadays. And we'd received that for our work at Broken Hill, and we've had quite a few of them over the years. And in the exploration space where we are, we've really had very few difficulties at all with permissions and the like. So it's been a pleasure to work in New South Wales. So just a bit about the company. If we could just move forward on the slides. Thanks. Look, we've been around since 2006. We've got quite a few shares in issue. We're quite a liquid stock. And but our market cap is suddenly sitting around about 35-40 million on the back of expectation of some results that we've got coming from both Broken Hill and Commonwealth. We've had tremendous support over the years from two German groups, ABC in particular. In the last couple of years, they're a subsidiary of a Frankfurt investment company who've invested heavily in the junior resources sector and at mid-tiers here in Australia. So well supported, we're cashed up, and we're just completing a 10,000 metre drill program at Broken Hill. Next slide. Just summary points here. Broken Hill, whilst it's well known for the silver lead zinc deposit, over 300 million tonnes, and I think Joe's going to talk further about Broken Hill in his section. We've been looking for nickel copper PGEs there, and as I say, coming to the end of a major drill program. It's been ongoing because we've seen significant encouragement, and we can expect a slew of results from that up till Christmas and into the new year. And at Commonwealth, we've just completed a very significant IP survey on top of the soil survey, which has really also delivered some excellent drill targets for copper gold, porphyry, which is of the style of Boda and Katie Ridgeway, which Trisha mentioned. Next slide. So just one quick slide for Broken Hill. We're drilling this intrusion called Little Broken Hill Gabbro. It's shown there in green. It's about 6 kilometres along, and amazingly enough, it's only got one drill hole into it, deeper than 25 metres. And yet we've done a lot of work over the last 5 years and worked out that it's in the same place and at the same time as Jinshuan, which is one of the world's largest nickel copper PGE ore bodies. At that time, 827 million years ago, and they were very close together. And you can see in the second picture here that Jinshuan is about the same size, formed at the same time. And so we're seeing some tremendous encouragement there, and we hope to have some good news out of that coming up. And then finally, just from Commonwealth, if we go to the next slide. And so a couple of months ago, we announced that we discovered a very significant copper gold soil anomaly. That's what these coloured dots represent, and the warm colours indicate higher copper and gold values. You can see the scale there. It's about 2 kilometres long and 1 kilometre wide. And whilst the core is exciting, it's the overall pattern that's important. If you show the next picture and the next two, that's it, next one. And we can see that it's ringed by extensive zinc and lead and a few other things. And that's a very classic zinc donut. And there's a classic example there from Waifi Goldpool in PNG, which has got about 30 million ounces of gold sitting underneath that same ring-like structure of zinc. It's the best one I've ever seen. We've got IP results coming out, which are fantastic. And we're going to be drilling that early in the new year. And on the thought of donuts, I'll leave you right there. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. I took 20 seconds off of your budget as you requested, but there's none of this making a statement that goes for 15 seconds and then expecting me to give you a bonus of 5. All right, that's not on. Look, we'll come back to questions from the audience at the end. I haven't seen any come through, but I have one for you. Fascinating analogy that you give, particularly in terms of age and types of rocks between Jinshuan and what you're drilling for at Little Broken Hill. I'm curious about what led you onto that ground. If that realization is modern, what led you onto the ground to look for nickel copper PGEs? And if you can answer that, how does it compare in terms of, does that intrusion look a lot like the Jinshuan intrusion in terms of size, or do you think you're sort of right at the top of something and it'll get, blow out as you get bigger?
Sure. So 2 questions there. The answer to the first one is that, look, nickel copper PGE has actually been known almost since they found Broken Hill. But the intrusions have really been viewed as being sort of small and a bit difficult to put things together. And if you read one of our last announcements, we've made a very good geochemical breakthrough, which is allowing us to sort of vector in to the higher grade portions, and it's been remarkably effective. So then we'll have more news out about that quite soon. And in terms of the actual intrusion, yeah, look, Little Broken Hill, it's about the same size in dimension as Jinshuan. Jinshuan is basically upright and has a fold in the middle, whereas ours is slightly tilted. So we think as we go deeper into this thing from the west side to the east, and that's where we're drilling at the moment. We've been drilling for several months there, and this geochemical ratio we've done is working very well. We're getting some very intriguing results. Not a big discovery yet, but we'll have more news out about that shortly as well.
Roughly how long do people need to wait before you think you'll start to have some of that dribbling onto ASX, Mike?
We'll have an announcement out on some of the stuff from one of the prospects Platinum Springs next week, and then it'll be continuous from then right into the new year. We had a drill rig due to start today on a very crucial hole, and as usual, we got down about 80 metres, almost above the target zone, and the piston broke. So we have to wait until it comes up from Cobalt. So maybe, Rob, if you've got a spare drill piston down a peel, we could borrow it. So
sling in one. Well, so
Hedley, sorry, just one quick question. We've got one question which was around the timeline. Where do you see the company in 1 to 3 to 5 years? I think you've answered that in the short term, but by all means, Mike, feel free to answer that. And then the other is a technical question from John Greenfield. Does the geochemical donut match the magnetics?
So in 1 to 3 years, look, these are the best targets that we've explored in the last 5 or 6 years. So, that we would hope to be, at a market cap 10 times what we are now, in 1 year's time, and who knows from there, if we get the kind of discovery that we're looking for, and has always been the driver behind Impact Minerals and the geological work that we do. In terms of the geochemistry, the magnetic data is generally too coarse to be very specific to identify like an exact deposit in nickel, copper, PG exploration. But what it does do is allow us to set the scene and the structure and the setting in which to conceptualize where we might find such a deposit, and then go ahead and drill it. And then once we get into the drilling, that's where this geochemistry breakthrough that we've made, which is in one of our announcements, people can look up, is really helping us guide the drill rig on a day-to-day basis. So that's the connection there.
I think it's fascinating. The area that you're looking in is clearly primed for big systems because it has one there already in Broken Hill. And I know that's not a nickel copper PGE system, but big systems form over big structures in the proto-earth. So, you're really looking for the right kind of rocks. And if you're looking the right kind of rocks in the right place, that's where they can occur. So we wish you all the best, particularly for that news coming up. I think in the chat rooms, they would say, get yourself set and hang on. So Impact, you've got us off to a really good start there, Mike. Thanks very much. We're not going to talk about time budgets because we don't have time. We're going to shuffle along, and we're not going far geographically. The next drop in the order there, we've got Cobalt Blue, which is headed up by Joe. And Joe, I'm going to have a crack at your surname here. I should have asked you earlier. Joe Kaderavek. I hope I've got that right. You can correct me in a moment. Now, Joe, as far as I'm aware, is not a practicing geoscientist. Looking up a bit of his background earlier, he comes to us with an investment banking background. And I am always struck with interest when you see someone who's come from one of these money-making machines and finds themselves in a junior company, because whatever it is that they've seen has to be quite interesting to them, with an investment background and everything else, and understanding how money gets made. So here's Joe sitting inside of Cobalt Blue, and I'm really interested to hear the story from your point of view, Joe. This is the first time I've actually heard it with you telling it. So over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Hedley. Thank you for the introduction. And for those I've not met, I'm Joe Kaderavek. I'm the CEO. And good day. I'll just ask for the next slide, please. Cobalt Blue is the 100% owner of the Broken Hill Cobalt project. There's a few things that are quite unique about us. Firstly is that we are a primary cobalt project, about an 80-20 revenue split between cobalt and other products. There's only 2 such projects in the listed Western world. The majority of cobalt, as I think people would appreciate, is a byproduct of either nickel or copper. Importantly to take away is that we are one of the largest greenfield cobalt projects in the world, and certainly the largest ex-Africa. There's enough cobalt to be produced by this project over a long period to power over 5 million electric vehicles going forward. So it's a big project on a global scale. We're also a key source of ethical cobalt going forward, and we'll be participating in chain of custody style programs. In terms of the project, it's at this stage a 20-year operating life. It's an integrated mine refinery, and I'll come back to that shortly. And we've just delivered in July an updated PFS, a cost optimized PFS, which delivered lowest quartile cost performance in all-in sustaining cost terms per pound of cobalt sulfate. So that's the finalized product. We're running at around $12 a pound, which is a top quartile outcome. To give you some bearing of what that means is that the long-term 30-year average cobalt price is around $25 a pound. So we are producing at about half that long-term average. To date, we've got 3 partners identified publicly, amongst others who are in consultation, primarily LG International. For those who are familiar with LG International, they are the capital deployment of the holding company. They've got both a mandate to source an investment, but also to source raw materials for its sister companies, being LG Electronics, which most people know, and importantly in the world of lithium-ion batteries, LG Chemical. So we represent both an investment as well as a source of raw material for those products, for those partners. Our next steps include a pilot plant, which we're actually building right now on the outskirts of Broken Hill. That'll be operational in February next year. And we hope to make 100 to 200 kilograms of these final products. Now that, for those in base metals or bulks, that doesn't sound like much, but in cobalt terms, 100 to 200 kilograms of product is a very big demonstration indeed. Longer term, we've got an FS delivered in late 2022, alongside an SSD, which we're currently in process of validating with the New South Wales Government. If I can ask for the next slide. This slide encapsulates our overall strategy. What we want to do is maximise the cobalt margin across the cycle. You can see there in the various columns of mine, we want to actually make an MHP, a mixed hydroxide product. About 70% of the world's cobalt is traded as an MHP product, so a very liquid market, typically payable around 70–75% of the cobalt price. We want to bolt a final refinery onto that and create a cobalt sulfate, a precursor-ready product, if you like, generally trading at about parity with the cobalt price. The trick for us, as for other incumbents in the space, is to try and make a high purity product, because as batteries go on and evolve and become higher and higher quality, it means that the contaminants have to be thrifted out of the cobalt, out of the cathode in particular. Could I get the next slide, please? In terms of who we are in the industry landscape, we've already received significant financial assistance, I should say, from the federal government as part of the CRCP program. Just over $2 million was awarded to a consortium. And we're a key part of the federal and state government's critical minerals strategies. We're currently participating in the Future Battery Industry, CRC, which is effectively an industry government mix. In particular, within the CRC, we're looking at an Australian precursor industry. In other words, to make the rudimentary building block to a battery right here in Australia as part of that Kwinana lithium hub. We're also participating in the CRCP, which I mentioned earlier, with University of New South Wales, ANSTO and others. There's over 10 project partners, which we can't name, who represent interested parties across the EU, Korea, Japan, India, interestingly enough, and also North America. And these partners have signed up for sample to come out of firstly our pilot plant in February, but ultimately the larger scale demonstration plant that we've committed to. So that's what the next 12 months or so holds. We think it's going to be an extremely strong validation of the project. And we also believe firmly in the battery cycle that will underpin all of this in the next few years. That's me.
Joe, well done. One question from me to start it, and I have a couple more to finish, but I think there was one or two from the floor. In the next weeks, months, sort of leading us into next year, it looks to me like you're going to have news around the development of the pilot plant and how well that works. Is that going to be sort of the short-term news flow for you? What are investors looking for in the shortest term there? New partners or anything, or is it more about developing that pilot plant? Yeah, so I'll answer your questions in twofold. Firstly, our development timeline, whilst we're clearly focused on our own feasibility, it's very commercially driven. LGI, who are a shareholder, came on and said, look, all of your risks seem palatable to us, but you've got an innovative process on an ore that hasn't been seen elsewhere in the world. Prove up the metallurgy. So what we're going to do next year is a two-step proof, a smaller scale demo pilot plant, which I said it's almost in commissioning at the moment, and then a larger scale demonstration plant. That proves the processing from an FS point of view, but it also proves the product. In the battery field, purity is king. And to make what we hope to make 2 to 3 tonne of cobalt sulfate in the end, that's a really important validation. So intrinsically, they are FS stepping stones, but externally, they're there to cater for a commercial market. Terrific. Mike, was there any from the floor that you'd like to throw in before we move on?
There was one macro question, which, Joe, you talked about belief in the future of the cobalt market. Tesla's announcement around they're not going to use all their, not going to use cobalt in their EV. How will that affect demand? Oh, look, I think the Tesla Battery Day announced probably in the order of 50 separate projects, some of which were intrinsically, long-dated projects.
The argument to thrift cobalt is an odd one, and it's a good one because cobalt doesn't actually have any electromotive assistance to the battery. You're trying to thrift it. It's effectively a cement, if you like, that keeps the battery stable. The idea that we're going to eliminate cobalt in the next 10 years is fanciful, and there's a number of industry inertia reasons for that, which we can discuss. Longer term, cobalt will be thrifted, but if you look at the supply demand of the industry, it has to be thrifted because there simply isn't enough of it to go around even in the short term unless the industry responds through its demand.
One more question. Again, quite a technical question. Can you sell the sulfur for sulfuric acid as a byproduct?
Yeah, look, we're well placed on sulfur. So sulfur is the other byproduct. We're on a train line, so logistically that's not. We're selling the elemental sulfur, so easy to handle. Australia imports just under 1 million tonne of sulfur equivalent per annum. Just over half of that goes into precursor for fertiliser, DAP, MAP production effectively. So as an investor, you're investing in a cobalt company, but its byproduct has no correlation whatsoever with our primary metal. We're happy that intrinsically will help farmers in the country. What's not sold in fertiliser becomes metallurgical sulfur for sulfuric acid and may well be shipped to one of my other peers on the panel today.
So you're doing a sales job on the company as well as your product. That's good use of time today. I think there's efficiency in that approach. We might move on because I think we're getting a healthy number of questions. It's going to make for a great discussion by the end of this. But let me move on to Rob Tyson from Peel. Rob probably doesn't know this, or I don't think I've told him. So if he does know it, I'd be surprised. But I started at Lion about 13 years ago, and I think Rob was probably the third or fourth meeting that I ever took meeting a company. And Rob was telling me about a really exciting exploration prospectivity of the Cobar Basin and a gold project which they had in Western Australia. The gold project, of course, has turned into another company all of its own, which is thriving. And Peel has gone on to have not one exploration prospect, but I think I don't want to steal your thunder, Rob, but their discoveries, not prospects. So I think you better tell the rest of the story, mate. But this is me coming a long way through my history here as well, getting this update.
Yeah, we both had a lot more hair back then, Hedley. I remember that. And that's what 13 years in the industry will do to you. But look, it's been a great 13 years. We've been in Cobar, for 10, 11 of that. I think when I saw you back then, we were in the New England, where the name Peel comes from. The Peel Fault near Tamworth was where we initially started exploration. But we went west to find our fortunes, I guess. And Cobar is a fantastic address, and it's not to take away from the New England, but we were very happy that we went west sort of a decade or so ago and ended up in Cobar. Cobar, for those who don't know, look, outside of Broken Hill, it's the richest polymetallic part of New South Wales, the richest polymetallic part of the Lachlan origin. It's a great place to be exploring. It's 8 hours from Sydney, but the infrastructure is fantastic. And look, a plug again to the New South Wales Government and IMARC for hosting this today. Look, I was quite happy for the secret of exploring in New South Wales to stay that way. But unfortunately, we're on the map, and the ELAs that are in over the New South Wales, the state at the moment show just how much so. And look, not with surprise, we've been in New South Wales for, as I said, 13 years, but in the last 10, we've been exploring primarily in Cobar. We've made 3 greenfields discoveries in 7 years in that province. Look, it's a wonderful patch to be exploring in. We've got about 3,000 square kilometres of tenure. And if you looked at this map a few months ago, it was multicoloured. All that green tenure that we've listed as Peel was actually split into other holdings, I guess. So we had 2 joint ventures, one with CBH Resources, who own the Endeavour mine. And interestingly, they announced recently that Sandfire has moved into the district. Sandfire's got about 1,000 square kilometres up around Cobar, and they've put their foot on the Endeavour infrastructure in a sort of a farm-in type deal. We also had JOGMEC, the Japanese government, involved in a lot of our regional exploration, regional tenure. But over the last few months, we've had a consolidation come to pass, and all this tenure has come back to us, and it really is what we think is very fortuitous. It's consolidation primarily into copper. That pie chart on the left-hand side of the slide there just shows the breakdown of the metals that you find in Cobar, and the copper, which is obviously essentially the major metal that's been found in Cobar, has primarily come from CSA Mine. That's just north of Cobar, owned by Glencore, discovered around 1870, but had a rebirth in the 1950s, 60s, and has been in pretty much continual operation since. Ranks in the top 5 high-grade copper mines in the world year in, year out for the last couple of decades. We think we've got an analogue at Mallee Bull, and Wirlong is possibly also quite similar in style. They're 2 of our greenfields discoveries. We're also exploring at Mayday, which is a gold-rich system. We've been drilling away there. We've got a whole heap of assays flowing from that. And then down to the south, Wagga Tank, Southern Nights. So Wagga Tank was an old discovery from the 70s, sort of forgotten about. We ventured back there a few years ago and made a major discovery at Southern Nights. Just off to the east of our tenement, near Hera, which is owned by Aurelia Metals. They've had some wonderful success as well with the Federation discovery. So this part of the world is, when we turned up, everyone said it was mature, but we found the exact opposite. There's a lot of fruit left hanging on the tree. If I could go to the next slide, please. So look, we're at a point where we've made the discoveries, and now it's time to really roll up the sleeves and put it all together for a new development. So it's this hub and spoke sort of model. We've got these discoveries, so we're now drilling them all out to get them to mineable resources. We've got a critical mass target of sort of 12 to 15 million tonnes. We think we've got every opportunity to put that together from the discoveries and the deposits we've got under our belt now. And Mayday is the first cab off the rank. This is part of the Mallee Bull JV, and we're buying that back from our partner CBH Resources for $17 million. We've got the cash for that. We did the fundraising for that, so it's just got to settle. So we're only waiting on transfer of title, which is subject to the minister's consent, and we expect that very soon. But essentially, all these assets 100% owned now, and it's all about building this critical mass, and I guess a central milling facility. And in our mind, all the mills that have been generally built for one specific ore body at the time of construction. We want to build a mill that can process all the ore styles we already have under our belt, but also anything else we're likely to come across. So something that can extract obviously precious metals, gold, silver, gravity circuit, but then sequential flotation and CIL as well. We're also looking at ore sorting. It's something that people talk about a lot, and we see huge potential there. The technology's come in leaps and bounds over the last decade, and we think our ore bodies are prime for that sort of technology to be fitted to it. Onto the next slide, please. And so, look, pretty simple forward program. Drill, drill, drill. Lots of assay results flowing over the next 6 to 9 months. We're finished at Mayday. We're on the last drill hole there now. So we'll have an updated resource there just after Christmas, New Year. Wagga Tank, Southern Nights, we plugged a few more holes in there recently, chasing some extensions with success. Assays pending on that, but that system's just going to keep growing. It's a significant zinc-rich VMS system. We don't know where the edges of it are. Wirlong's actually the next cab off the rank. We're due to go up there in the next couple of weeks. Next week actually, and start drilling for a maiden copper-rich resource. And then Mallee Bull, once we've settled, which hopefully is imminent, we'll look to upgrade that resource and then bolt it all together essentially for a new development in the Cobar Basin, in the central southern part of the Cobar Basin. So pretty straightforward, lots of news coming, but very exciting to be turning from explorer really into developer over the months, years ahead. It'll probably take about 2 years to put all this together into a PFS, but really pivoting to copper too, which, talking about cobalt and nickel, obviously in the last talks, you know, we see copper as having a very bright future with the electrification of the world, and it will be our primary economic metal of interest going forward.
There's a few really interesting themes there for you, Rob. I mean, the electrification that you can feed into with the copper, but also the drill. But nothing the market likes much more than exploration results and you know, some of those things which will come from your programs. I've got one question to start you off with, and we might have one from the floor, I'm not sure. A phrase which has been uttered numerous times historically would be renaissance of the Cobalt field, and this is one of them. It's having one of its famous renaissances, and you know, it's been a field which has had a bit of volatility. I think that is because as metal prices swing, the deposits might, for a temporary period of time, become economic or have to contract in terms of activity. But we're at the early stage of a metal cycle. I think that's got an enormous runway there for development of projects, but also activity in the basin. The other thing which has given it a long history, which has been a bit volatile, is that these deposits strike me that they start close to the surface and tend to have a very strong and extensive vertical continuity. And you're really just scratching the top of them. So, I mean, I imagine if you're building a business there, you must have a sense that it could have a fairly long-term future, right?
For sure. Look, I think you're right. There's been some fluctuations in fortunes. And I think that's to do with the maturity of a lot of the deposits. You know, CSA is down 1,800 metres below surface. You know, you know, I think Mallee Bull would have looked quite similar to CSA in the top 800 metres. We don't know what's below 800 metres. We haven't had enough money to drill too many holes deeper than that. But, you know, it is a lookalike, no question. And yeah, so, but what they do have, these deposits, is grade, and that does see you through the commodity cycle. You know, I mean,
yep.
You look at that Kronos lode at peak, you know, it was just, you know, an ounce a tonne dirt, and they had hundreds of thousands of tonnes, I believe, you know.
And these systems seem to keep on giving as well. I mean, there's been some shallow discoveries within some of those established mines in recent history. So, you know, getting into it is sometimes the important thing for unlocking the secret. Nick, is there anything from the floor that you'd like to throw in there as a question for Rob before we move on?
There's one, Hedley, actually. It's around, you talked about the four deposits. Looking into the future, talked about development. Where would you build the mill?
Look, at Mallee Bull, we own 20,000 acres of Western Lands lease. We bought about 6-7 years ago with an eye on the future. So that's an easy place to obviously look to position a mill. But we're also Mayday's quite close to the Moomba to Sydney gas pipeline. So there's some energy potentially not too far away as well. So look, we're still, I guess, looking into it, and we need to understand what these deposits, I guess, what their exploration upside is, but also whether ore sorting can work on them. That'll help us nail down where we're going to put a mill.
Great stuff. Look, I might stop you there, Rob, and we'll move on to the last speaker and then get to some general questions towards the end there. So thank you very much, Rob from Peel. Final company in the order of companies presenting today is Kincora. This is a non-ASX listed company at the moment, listed in Canada, and headed up by Sam, who's going to tell us all about it. Now, we've heard from two geoscientists as far as the companies go and an investment banker. Sam, maybe even as early as this morning, looked like a geologist with a fairly rugged-looking piece of facial hair there. It might surprise you to know that I think his qualification originally is as an accountant. But Sam is almost a better geologist than most of the geologists I know. He picks things up technically extremely quickly and thoroughly and diligently. So I think we're going to hear a story here that you might think you're hearing from a geoscientist. Don't forget, it's just an accountant at the end of the day. But Sam, over to you. Can you tell us about Kincora?
Thank you, Hedley, and the disclaimers there. It sounds like I don't even have to read page 2 of the presentation. Well, good to have the opportunity, and thank you to IMARC and New South Wales Survey. As Hedley picked up, we're listed in Canada. We undertook a raising in August, 5.3 million Canadian, and part of that is to IPO on the ASX. Really, the focus for us as a company now is New South Wales. We're relatively new entrant. We're not like Mike or Rob, who have been in this region for a long period of time. So I guess we're able to talk about this as a company from a new entrant, and have reiterated, and I'll be able to talk to a number of the points that Trisha's made as well. But we're drilling. We're on hole 11 at the Trundle project. Here's some interesting looking core that we've got in the lab at the moment, and with that I might just move through the next couple of slides and put us on the map. Usual disclaimers. So location. As touched on, the Lachlan Origin hosts the Macquarie Arc, and the Macquarie Arc is the leading porphyry belt in Australia. We're focused on porphyries as a company. That's what our skill set is, and this is a world-class gold-rich porphyry belt. Mines like Cadia, as Trisha mentioned, Australia's biggest gold mine with at the moment a 1,700 an ounce all-in margin, which is pretty extraordinary. It just shows how favourable these gold-rich copper porphyry systems can be. And what we're trying to find is the next significant one. If you're not on the Macquarie Arc, which we've got very crudely and simplistically outlined here, the two major belts being Molong Belt to the west, to the east, and to the west, the Junee Narromine. If you're not on the Macquarie Arc, the odds of finding a porphyry are very low. Not to say that you won't find some fascinating other systems in the wider region. We've had some excellent case studies discussed on. And the project portfolio that Kincora has been able to secure is really focused on those projects that sit on the Macquarie Arc. We've got 1,700 almost square kilometres, 8 licences, all but one sitting on the key parts of the belt. And why we're looking for that, maybe if we can slip on to the next slide, I'll come to the team. And it's a team that has found porphyries before. John Holliday, who's our technical director, he's based in Orange. He was the principal discoverer of Cadia. He was the man that helped us identify a lot of the portfolio that we've now got in here. Peter Lehman, also credited with the Tier 1 discovery, and a really strong technical team. I guess Hedley said that I sort of sound like a geologist. It's not because I'm particularly smart. I'm just surrounded by good people who know the sector and know porphyries and have got that sort of background. And that's what we're looking to do, is replicate that success. And one of the key things, given the stage that we're at, we're trying to make a discovery, is to have skin in the game, backing people that have got that track record. So skipping on to the next slide, if we can. So the focus really for us at the moment is Trundle. Trundle, we're drilling, have been since April. We've had significant success. Initially, first hole, 51 metres of 1.2 grams a tonne and 0.5% copper from shallow depths, higher grade section within that. But it's pretty unique, and this is sort of talking to the potential of New South Wales, that we've been able to secure a couple of projects here that really are in the shadow of a head frame of existing operations. It's unique to be able to get that in any jurisdiction, let alone a place like New South Wales, where you've got excellent infrastructure, security of tenure. Trundle is widely regarded to sit in the same intrusive complex as North Parkes, Australia's second biggest porphyry mine, 5 economic porphyry pipes with significant gold credits helping, having a very favourable copper operating cost. So at Trundle, as mentioned, started drilling there in April, operated continuously since, on hole 11, and an exploration update out in the next couple of weeks. A second project that we're just going through landholder access and permitting for is Fairholme. Fairholme sits, the targets we're looking to drill, less than 15 kilometres away from Lake Cowell. And Evolution's done a fantastic job with that project, having bought it from Barrick with about 3.4 million ounces and taking that up to 9 million ounces now. Interestingly, that region around there was really explored for porphyries early back in the day. It's porphyry-related system mineralisation. And our Fairholme project has never been drilled for a gold type system. The focus there has always been porphyries, but as Evolution's very successfully done, it's shown in this immediate part of the Macquarie Arc that the real potential is for gold. So this is the pipeline of projects. We've done almost 7,000 metres of drilling at Trundle. We're planning about a 4,000 metre program at Fairholme for next year. There's another project that I haven't talked of in this presentation called Ningen, which is up in the northern part of the Jeanine Narromine Belt. As Trisha mentioned, part of the incentives that New South Wales Government has made is these cooperative funding grants. We've been fortunate enough to secure cooperative funding to drill a couple of holes into Ningen and see if our theory of that being the northern undercover extension of the Jeanine Narromine Belt is correct, similar to what Alkane has proven Boda to be in the northern part of the undercover part of the Molong Belt. So I guess initially good results at Trundle, looking to start drilling at Fairholme, looking to do some drilling at Ningen, and really benefiting from, I guess, a lot of this existing data that you're able to access in New South Wales, an excellent catalogue system and access to previous explorer data, which really does help new groups come in and be able to fast track getting the drill bit turning and testing targets to see if we can find the next large porphyry in this belt.
Sam, you've given us a really good reason to look a bit closer at Kincora, but you've also promoted New South Wales quite effectively there in terms of painting the picture of how you guys have got sort of off the ground and running, if you like, from a fairly quick start there. And let me just paint a little bit of a picture there to ask you a question. You and I have spent a lot of time talking in a capital city of a foreign country, in Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia, given that Kincora had a focus there to start with. I mean, Mongolia, if you want to go exploring somewhere that hasn't been explored and have a great chance of finding a massive porphyry or a gold system, it's a great place to be. You've been exploring there, and then you sort of pick up something else in the world, and here it is in New South Wales. So to me, as far as prospectivity and having guys like Dr. John Holliday involved with you, to be landing in New South Wales where he found Cadia, it says something. So, what was it drew you to this part of the world that said, we've got to drill here instead of Mongolia, where you could find something big as well?
Well, there was some ground Ningen Nevertai that we were able to pick up directly from the state. We were looking at diversification, other opportunities in different jurisdictions. And John had pegged twice Ningen from Newcrest, and the last time they drilled and got a good result, some bornite at the end of the hole, was never followed up. And we were able to pick that up directly from the government. Very simple. And I guess that was pre-Boda. Obviously, post-Boda, there's been a significant land rush looking for porphyries in this region. FMG and Flexion have picked up all the ground that we left around us. But we've been very fortunate in terms of the data that you get, being able to really leapfrog to that point and being able to drill. We signed an MOU with another Aussie listed company in January. We had that completed in March, and we were drilling in April. The permitting process and going through and meeting landowners, we're fortunate enough that a lot of these projects have had work done on them in the past. So most of the landowners have seen explorers and understand that. And we're out in particularly the Jeanine Narromine Belt, where it's proper farming land. So they're very pragmatic people. So it's been a really interesting transition from going from the southern Gobi to, which is Mongolia's leading porphyry belt, to what is Australia's leading porphyry belt here in the Macquarie Arc.
New South Wales isn't famous for its vodka, but Mongolia is. I don't know if you've been missing too much more about it. You know, the food in New South Wales is possibly a little bit better. So welcome to Australia, mate. And I might, Nick, unless you've got anything from the floor for Sam in particular, do you want to open this up to general questioning now?
Yep, I think that'd be a good idea.
Yep. Oh, sorry, Mike. I'm mixing up the facilitators here. I can't see anything, Mike. So I might ask a couple of general questions of my own. Is that okay?
Sure.
Perfect. So Sam, you actually made a point here, and I might address this to the panel. So I don't know who will best answer this, but when you think about someone like Western Australia, there are some enormous companies. BHP and Rio have both got head offices in Perth and enormous operations there in one commodity. And then, of course, we've got Northern Star, a top 10 gold producer, a very recently minted top 10 gold producer, and then a huge long tail of mid-tiers and juniors after that. New South Wales, I suspect the opportunities are quite a lot more compact in terms of the number of companies there. But I think a lot of people might miss the perspective that New South Wales sees the presence very heavily of Glencore, major miner. It's got an enormous presence of some very large companies that mine coal there. And then, of course, there's Evolution and Newcrest that both have sort of a centre of gravity, I think you would say, in New South Wales as well. But there are some big companies which have moved in there. Sam, you mentioned FMG. I think there's a couple of others that have been pegging. Is there anyone who can give me a perspective there on, this, call it a pegging rush? There's a lot of people who've pegged ground in New South Wales recently, and they've kind of come in off the back of some recent technical understandings or Sam, are you the best place to start with that? Who's looking in New South Wales that we should be aware of?
Well, I guess I can talk to our experience having been relatively new there. We've got Fortescue that's picked up ground adjacent to us on 4 of our licences, and we've only been in the state since really this year. So that's a pretty good indicator. You've got a Canadian group, Inflection, that's just IPO'd, picked up a lot of ground. You've had Godolphin IPO, you've had Kaiser IPO, you've had a lot of new entrants. And I guess one thing that we found when we first came into the belt was just when COVID was coming through, we were able to get drilling contractors okay, but now it's increasingly difficult because there's a hive of activity from the larger players to the mid-tiers to the guys that really are a little bit under the radar, and there's a lot of private groups out there too. So getting good geologists, getting assays turned around from the lab, all those sort of things are increasingly becoming difficult, which is a sign of the activity taking place.
Yep. Mike Jones and Rob from Peel, you guys have been in New South Wales for some time with a focus. What can you say about the influx or otherwise of larger companies which are suddenly taking an interest? It strikes me that it's happening. I'm just wondering about your experience. Rob, is there anything you can say to that?
Well, look, I guess in the Cobalt Basin, we've seen big companies come and go as the commodity cycles waxed and waned. But certainly there's been, we've used that, I guess, to our advantage to secure a footprint there. And I think the early movers, would be pretty glad they've done that. But look, no question, FMG rocked up a few years ago and has built a significant presence out of Orange, I believe, and obviously really looking in earnest for those copper gold porphyries. Sandfire turned up, I think 2 years ago it was, into the west of Cobar with some ELAs, just pegged some ground. But now they've made a significant move, I guess, into infrastructure with the deal with CBH over Endeavour. I'm not sure out at Broken Hill, but I imagine it's similar, that there's been some fairly big interest. I'm pretty sure I saw Newmont and Anglo Gold have been picking up ground throughout throughout New South Wales. That might be a government. Someone like John Greenfield might be able to answer that, or Trisha.
Trisha, I don't want to put you on the spot there. You might not be able to say who's pegging and who's not, but are you able to give maybe a qualitative response on? I think New South Wales has found itself on the map, and perhaps it was the discovery hole into Boda. It's yet to become a resource, but there's been some pretty notable successes in terms of big drill holes have come out in New South Wales in the not too distant past. And that tends to draw people from all around, and bigger companies come looking for big things and they go to safe jurisdictions. So are you seeing a trend as I'm observing, or am I imagining this?
No, well, I can probably speak statistically to the trends. Being the sort of the information manager within the Geological Survey, I guess that's from my perspective. There certainly has been an increase, in the application processes, and we've seen a record number of ELAs coming into the organisation. So certainly from that, we are seeing that as a trend, an upward trend. But I do know my colleague, John Greenfield, is online here, Director of Geoscience Acquisition and Synthesis, and I think he might be keen to also contribute an answer on this as well.
Sure.
So I'll hand over to John.
Happy to hear from you, John. If he's unmuted, go for it.
Yeah, g'day, Hedley. Good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, great session. We've seen an amazing uptick in exploration and also exploration expenditure. We've actually doubled our exploration expenditure in New South Wales in the last 4 years. and our proportion of tenement take up as well. So yeah, there's been a huge uptake. No doubt, Cadia being, it's not just the biggest gold producer, but just the all-in sustaining costs last quarter was $160 per ounce of gold. That's just extraordinary, you know. That's just world leading, and apart from the size of the deposit. So no doubt, Macquarie Arc is seeing, and the bigger companies want to get in. It's difficult; they're having to do deals to get in. But we like the explorers we've got in there at the moment. You know, just looking at Trundle, that's clearly a piece of the North Parkes puzzle. So there's a lot of analogies there to North Parkes, and it'd be great to see another North Parkes mine getting up. And Cobalt, the work that Rob and Peel have done to open up the Mount Hope Trough to the south. Everyone was very focused on the main line of Cobalt deposits, which is on the eastern margin. And it was really Rob and his team that really opened up the southern parts of that. And then, of course, Aurelia coming in with here and further south. So, you know, it's just a fantastic time for us in New South Wales to see this activity, but also the success and the commitment of the companies to doing, you know, really solid exploration and drilling.
Look, I'd mirror your comments there. I think it has been a period of success of New South Wales and probably through some diligent effort of government support, particularly with that pre-competitive information, which enables people to come and see the size of the prize. So congratulations to you all on that as well. And I don't have a statistic on this. I'm not sure if you do, but it must have been a wonderful sense of fulfillment for some New South Wales gold out of the, I think it was the Cowl pit to create the Melbourne Cup trophy, which I don't know how often that's happened, but it wouldn't be all the time that New South Wales gets to provide the trophy for the greatest horse race in the world, which doesn't happen in New South Wales, of course. It happens in Victoria, but
that's true, Hedley. Although Healing Gold did provide the gold for the 2000 medals for the Olympics. So,
which was a great achievement as well. I'm getting a bit of a nudge here from the organisers to start wrapping up. So I might just start by saying thanks, John, for chiming in with that and sort of bringing the comments in at the end there. Thanks to each of the companies. You've told your story in a period of time which is perfect. I think these short presentations mean you hit your headlines, and all of the investors who are on this call should have more than enough to tell them that they need to go and check out every single one of your websites, download your presentation, and then get as full as a state school with some with some impact, some Cobalt Blue, some Peel, and some Kincora. You might have to go offshore for Kincora, but I think, Sammy, you might have some news for them, how it might be getting a bit easier for them to get that going into the future there. So keep tuned for that. Thanks also to the Government of New South Wales, represented in this case by Trisha. Thanks very much for the opening remarks and for making it possible for this session to take place. And to IMARC, the organisers of the IMARC conference, for coinciding this session. I think it's been a really good discussion, great participation by everyone and some questions there. Sorry we couldn't get to everything, but thanks all for attending there. Mike and Nick, why don't you wrap it up?
Well, Hedley, no, thank you so much. And again, I'll reiterate, thank you, Trisha, and the New South Wales Government and the survey as well. Thank you for putting together the panel. 4 excellent panelists. Hedley, I didn't know you had an egg timer, which was 3 minutes, but obviously that's pretty clear. You're much more fastidious about timing. So yeah, thank you to all the participants. One little plug: if you're interested in speaking to Mike or Rob from Peel and Impact, they will be attending Mines and Money Global next week for meetings as well. So if you're an interested investor, please do get involved next week. But no, thank you for all attending. Thank you for coming to the event, and I hope you enjoy the rest of IMARC.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, bye.
Thank you all.
Cheers.
Well done.
Thank you.